Steven Spielberg.
That's amazing. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Steven Allen Spielberg is an American film director, producer, and screenwriter. He is considered one of the founding pioneers of the new Hollywood era, and one of the most popular directors and producers in film history. Spielberg is an enormously successful and award-winning director of films such as Jaws, Jurassic Park,
Dr. Grant?
E.T., The Extraterrestrial, Saving Private Ryan, and many more. Steven Spielberg was born on December 18, 1946, in Cincinnati, Ohio, to Leah Adler, a concert pianist and restaurateur, and Arnold Spielberg, an electrical engineer who worked in computer development. He was the oldest and the only son of 4 children, and he was indulged throughout his childhood at home, but was not treated the same way at school. He displayed little enthusiasm for his studies and made average grades at best.
Well, I would have probably hesitated if I had like a couple good years. Then I would have said, well, there was the 4th and 5th grade. No.
What about your popularity? Were you a popular kid?
No. I was, you know, the last kid to be chosen for the softball team, the last kid to be chosen for the touch football team, the last kid to be chosen for basically everything, including badminton. You know?
And then something happened that changed his life.
We bought him a little movie camera, and he just started off. But we didn't know he was Steven Spielberg. I mean, this is my little blonde kid with the ears and little bangs. I mean, he'd want to do something harebrained, like go out in the desert and make a movie.
How old?
Oh, 8. I drove an Army Jeep. We lived in Arizona. And I had a pith helmet and a fatigue outfit. And he'd say, let's go.
And I think it all started out when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And my father came over to me and said, I'm going to take you to see the greatest show on earth. And when you promise a 6, 7, 8-year-old young boy that you're about to see the greatest show on earth, I couldn't have been more excited. My father explained there were going to be lion tamers and circus acts. There were going to be clowns and trapeze artists. And I was absolutely delighted, and I looked forward to this for a week. On the weekend, we got into the car, we drove to Philadelphia. We lived in New Jersey, in Haddon Township, New Jersey. We drove into Philadelphia, and it was very, very cold. It was wintertime around the holiday season. And we stood in a very long line, I remember, against a solid red brick wall for what seemed like hours. I think we actually stood in line for about 2.5 hours. The line just inched forward. I didn't quite understand. I was waiting to see the tent, and there was not a tent, there was a brick wall. We walked into some rather large doors, and we walked into a very kind of a dimly lit room. I remember the room had a lot of pink and purple lights. And I still didn't quite understand about the greatest show on earth. And I sat down in some seats, and they were all facing forward, not bleachers, but seats. It was a large red curtain. I'll never forget this. And the curtain opened, the lights went down, and a dimly lit image came on the screen, and it was flickering, and it was kind of grainy because we were sitting way in front. And suddenly I realized that my father had lied to me and had betrayed me, and had taken me to a circus that wasn't a circus. It was a movie about a circus. And I had never seen a movie before. That was the first movie I ever saw, Cecil B. DeMille's The Greatest Show on Earth. I had never seen a motion picture before. I had seen a lot of television because my dad was an electrical engineer, and in his spare time, when he wasn't working for RCA, he was repairing the early television sets of the early 50s. So I knew television, but I didn't know movies. That was my first movie experience. And I think the feeling of disappointment and regret and betrayal lasted only about 10 minutes. And then I became just one more victim of this tremendous drug called cinema. And I was no longer in a theater. I was no longer in a seat. I wasn't aware of the surroundings. I became part of an experience. And I became part of the lives of a lot of people that I never would meet, and I would only get to know in this one story, but that became my life.
The family moved several times growing up, due to Arnold Spielberg's job. They moved to New Jersey, suburban Phoenix, Arizona, and finally to what would be known as Silicon Valley, near San Jose, California. As a child, Spielberg would use his family's home movie camera, recording camping trips and other family events, but soon grew dissatisfied with them. He began to film narrative movies and attempted to set up shots with different angles and primitive special effects. By the time he was 12 years old, he created a film from a script using a cast of actors, and grew increasingly ambitious within the field of film. During his teens, his Escape to Nowhere, a 40-minute war film, won first prize at a film festival, and when Spielberg was 16, he filmed a feature-length sci-fi film, which was entitled Firelight. This film was over 2 hours long and had a complex plot about an encounter with some aliens. His father rented a local movie theater to show the film. In one night it made back the $500 it cost to produce it. He went to California State University Long Beach to study English, after being rejected from film school multiple times.
When a journalist asked me years ago a question I really couldn't answer, they said, what do you do? Why do you do this? And I don't know where it came from, but I sort of turned to the journalist in a flip kind of way. I said, I dream for a living. Years later, I realized, well, that's exactly what I do. I dream for a living. This is what I've done all my life. This is what I wanted to do with my life. And yet, I never really had a career plan. We all have plans. We all make plans. It sometimes starts when you have to declare a major. And I, of course, was at a college that didn't have the major that I would have declared, which was film and television. So I was an undeclared major. I majored in English because my father told me I needed a fallback career in case the movie directing thing didn't work out. And he said that if you major in English, you can teach. And teaching is a noble profession, something that I have come to understand.
He wrote and directed Amblin, his first short film on 35mm, whilst still a college student. The film caught the eye of Universal Vice President Sidney Sheinberg, who offered Spielberg a 7-year contract. He dropped out to pursue his entertainment career when he became one of the youngest television directors at Universal in the late 1960s. Later on, he did finish his BA degree and graduated, to show his children the importance of an education, as well as for his parents. A highly praised television film, Duel in 1972, brought him the opportunity to direct for cinema, and a long string of hits have made him the most commercially successful director of all time. It was generally regarded as one of the greatest movies ever made for US television. It was released in movie theaters in Europe and Japan as a feature film, only taking 16 days to make and only costing $350,000 to produce. Its release overseas earned over $5 million and the film earned many awards.
I was sitting around the office one day looking through scripts, continuing to write, trying to get my feature film ideas off the ground, trying to get somebody to hire me. And my assistant, Nona Tyson, found Duel. She said, I read this article, this short story by Richard Matheson. She said, I love the fiction. And she said, I want you to read the short story. I think this is right up your alley. And I read the short story and I said, wow, this is terrifying. This is like a Hitchcock movie. It's like Psycho with the birds, only it's on wheels. A truck chasing a salesman through the desert. And she said, well, I also found out that Richard Matheson is writing a screenplay that they're going to do as a movie of the week, and it's being produced by George Eckstein. She gave me all this information, so I called up George Eckstein, who didn't know me from Adam, knew of me because they used to call me Sheinberg's Folly, because I was the young kid he had hired. I think was the youngest person ever signed under a term contract in Universal's history, and I wasn't really that highly regarded. I was this abstract kind of young person that only loved lenses and dolly shots and didn't know anything about acting. That's at least the reputation I had then. And I called George Eckstein up and I said, I've read this short story, haven't read the script yet, I'd love to talk to you about this. And so he invited me over to his office and he asked for me to bring the work I was proudest of, so you can see an example of my most recent work. So I brought over the rough cut of Columbo, which hadn't even aired yet, but I brought the rough cut over. And I left him with the rough cut after we had his conversation. He saw the cut. Then he called me back to his office and he said, okay, give me your ideas and how you'd like to make this into a movie. And he gave me the script of Duel. And I read the script, and I came back, had another meeting with George, gave him all my ideas, and he said, well, I'll get back to you. And a day went by, 2 days went by, I didn't hear a thing. On the third day, I got a call from George who said, okay, I'd like you to direct this. It was like the greatest phone call. It was the second greatest phone call I ever had. The first being when Steinberg called me and got me out of college to be a director. And the second one was when Eckstein called me and said, I'd like you to direct Duel. And that's sort of how it all began. My attraction to it wasn't because it was a horror movie and I didn't really see anything about it as a Western. I thought it was just a complete exercise in a cat-and-mouse game of classic suspense. And to give credit where credit is due, it's Richard Matheson that was very clear in his teleplay that you didn't see the driver. You might see a hand out the window telling him to go on into oncoming traffic. You might see his boots, but you would never see the face of the driver. That was Richard Matheson. And that attracted me more than anything else. The unseen is always more frightening than what you throw in the audience's face.
After this, Spielberg was offered many scripts, but was not impressed by the quality of the properties that he was offered. He withdrew from the studio mainstream for a year in order to develop a project of his own. The Sugarland Express, a drama about a woman who browbeats her husband into breaking out of jail to kidnap their baby from its foster parents, was a critical success but a commercial failure. Nonetheless, it led to the breakthrough film of Spielberg's career, the spectacularly successful Jaws in 1975.
Making a feature film at sea stops just short of a nightmare. It's the second day of American shooting on Jaws. They've already been to Australia for the underwater shots of the shark.
Turn on the walkie-talkie, please, Freddie. I don't think Freddie can listen.
Freddie!
Sendar, I need to talk to you, Fred. Turn on the walkie-talkie. Guys, we can't shoot right now. Hold on. Have that belt go out and pull the anchor up and reset it off there, okay?
Jaws is one of the hottest properties in the film world this year. The book was an instant hit in America, and the film rights were commensurately costly. To shoot for 13 weeks at a budget of over £1 million is something of a rarity these days, so the producers, Richard Zanuck and David Brown, must have a lot of faith in their property, and even more in their director, Mr. Spielberg, who is only 26 years old. In America, he's already provided them with a financial and critical success in Sugarland Express, which he directed. He won the award for Best Screenplay at the recent Cannes Festival. Age never seems to have daunted Mr. Spielberg. At 20, he was directing episodes of Columbo in Hollywood. At 22, he made Duel, the story of a motorist being chased by a lorry, which got rave reviews when it was eventually released here. And now Jaws.
No, because he'll be so energetic, and he'll be screaming and yelling, it's a great white, I knew it all along. And there's only room in there for one quick line, expository line about the mate. The mate. Where's the mate? Dead. We'll have to Where's the body? Why is the boat torn to pieces? Because it's a great white shark.
It was a very exciting movie to make. It was a frightening film to make. Most of the fear came because it was a physical production. We were out on the water with big waves and trying to keep the camera boats and the generator boats and the lighting boats and everything that had to be anchored down to a 30-foot sandy bottom. At the same time, being tossed and turned by a very heavy sea, keeping all that situated and trying to hold composition, because I'm sort of a stickler for composed frames, and I found on Martha's Vineyard, especially in the Nantucket Sound, you really can't compose very much, because when you put your camera here to shoot the boat over here, 10 minutes later the boat's over here, dragging anchors, and you have to pull back up on the anchors, and that's an hour later. Right about here on the spot, and we began brainstorming ideas on what to add to the book, what to take out of the book. It was right here in this rock we decided to lose the love interest, which we felt deserved a movie of its own, and it was kind of made impotent because it was in a movie that was a straight-line adventure film about the shark and the town and the hunt. I consider the movie a sequel to the novel rather than an adaptation. It's very, very hard. I had never experienced adapting a novel before, and Peter Benchley, who wrote the first 3 drafts of the screenplay, admitted finally that a screenplay and a novel are 2 different kettles of fish.
Despite bringing in Jaws way over its $3.5 million budget, Spielberg became Hollywood's favorite director of the moment when the film grossed over $60 million within its first month. The film was as popular with critics as it was with the public, and the filmmaker was now in a position to do whatever he wanted. It featured Roy Scheider as the police chief of a resort town who battles a man-eating white shark. Joining him are Richard Dreyfuss as a marine biologist and Robert Shaw as a shark hunter. The highly praised thriller received an Academy Award nomination for Best Picture, and its ominous soundtrack by John Williams won an Oscar.
Hello.
Today, Spielberg is revered here at Universal Studios, and although he makes movies for other studios as well, if you take the tour of the back lot, the biggest attractions are from Spielberg movies.
There's the shark right there. There's Jaws. Now, why the shark works so well here every day, and I couldn't get the damn thing working for 2 months in Martha's Vineyard in '74, I'll never know. The shark was scheduled to make many more appearances, according to the script, and when the shark wasn't ready, or when we tested it and it sunk, what we did was, I just decided to shoot without the shark, and in a way, I think it increased the, it torqued up the suspense of the movie because you really didn't know where it was going to come from next, and rather than not seeing the shark every scene, instead, I just played a lot of the fear from people in water, seeing their legs kicking, a point of view of the camera moving, or just seeing the surface of the water with nothing below. That's what I think turned the movie into a more of an exercise of suspense than just a horror film.
So if you had had the shark when you wanted it, you probably would have had a different movie.
I probably would have had a movie that wouldn't have been as successful, I think, yeah.
Spielberg then directed the mystical science fiction tale Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977, which he also wrote. Dreyfuss was cast as the lead, and he submitted one of the best performances of his career, as a telephone lineman who encounters an unidentified flying object and subsequently becomes obsessed with UFOs. For the film, Spielberg received his first Academy Award nomination for Best Director. The film was a project that Spielberg had conceived, and was pitching to studios before Jaws, and is the first wholly original vision he'd bring to the feature film screen. It won Oscars for Best Cinematography, and a Special Achievement Oscar for Sound Effects Editing. It was also nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Best Art Direction, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Visual Effects, Best Original Score, and Best Director, Spielberg's first such nomination by the Academy. Spielberg became just the second director in history to score back-to-back $100 million grosses. After the disappointing 1941, which was received as an unfunny comedy, despite the presence of John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, Spielberg directed Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. The film and its sequels, which starred Harrison Ford as archaeologist Indiana Jones, used rich color cinematography, brisk editing, memorable musical soundtracks, and inventive special effects to create a cinematic experience that was typically light yet highly suspenseful. Spielberg received his second Academy Award nomination for Best Director, and the film was also a Best Picture nominee. Raiders of the Lost Ark was the film where he worked with his close friend, George Lucas, for the first time. 1981 was also the year that marked a very important milestone for Spielberg's professional life as he set out for his independence as a filmmaker with the creation of Amblin Entertainment, a production company that he co-created with Raiders producer Frank Marshall and associate Kathleen Kennedy. The three would go on to produce some of the most beloved entertainments of the era. Dubbed The Summer of Spielberg by Time magazine, June of 1982 saw Poltergeist and E.T. The Extraterrestrial, open in theaters just a week apart. Whilst Poltergeist, released on June 4th, is a film that shows the dark side of the filmmaker's imagination that will leave the audience with chills, he said that E.T., released on June 11th, represented a light side of his dreams, and the piece struck a truly deep chord with audiences around the world, becoming a beloved film that's constantly played. Poltergeist was nominated for 3 Oscars, and E.T., The Extraterrestrial, was nominated for 9 including Best Picture, Best Director and Best Writing, winning for Best Original Score by John Williams, Best Sound, Best Visual Effects, and Best Sound Effects Editing.
I have doubts about myself in both worlds.
Thinking that you can't pull it off?
Yeah. Every movie I make, and every movie I start, I don't think I can pull it off.
When you go onto a set in the morning for a movie, you nervous?
Yeah, every morning. Yeah. It's the same feeling I get going to work every morning as the feeling I got going to school every day. Being a bit of an outsider and not being normal and not quite getting good grades and not being able to compete, and my tummy is spilkus, my mom would call it. You know, I'd have before school every day, and I feel that when I make movies too.
But you're better at this than you were in school.
Oh, damn straight.
After directing Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in 1984, Spielberg adapted Alice Walker's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Color Purple, in 1985. The film opened in America on the 22nd of December, and went on to receive 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Actress in a Leading Role for Goldberg. Goldberg won a Golden Globe for her performance, while the film also received 4 other Globe nominations, and Spielberg himself won the Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Motion Pictures from the Directors Guild of America. Steven Spielberg also created the story of The Goonies, a beloved kids' adventure, which has the screenplay written by Chris Columbus, and was directed by Richard Donner. It opened in theaters on June 7, 1985. The Goonies, along with Back to the Future, which was executively produced by Spielberg, released just under a month later on July 3, helped to further the Amblin Entertainment brand, with what's now considered classic filmed entertainment, that both kids and adults could enjoy together. Spielberg is also known for his impressive historical films. The Holocaust drama Schindler's List of 1993, starring Liam Neeson as a businessman who helps save Jewish citizens, won 7 Academy Awards, including Spielberg's first win as Best Director. He revisited World War II, this time from the perspective of American soldiers in Europe in Saving Private Ryan in 1998, which earned him another Academy Award for Best Director. His first film company, Amblin Entertainment, produced several other successful movies, notably Back to the Future in 1985 and its 2 sequels, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit in 1988. In 1987, Spielberg expanded his storytelling reach into purely dramatic fare with Empire of the Sun, based in part of author J.G. Ballard's own life experience as a boy growing up who was imprisoned in a Japanese encampment in an occupied Shanghai during World War II. The film marked the first time that a Western production company was granted permission to film within the city of Shanghai. Spielberg has stated that films including Empire of the Sun and The Color Purple led to his feeling of having the tools and insights within himself to direct and produce Schindler's List, which was released 6 years later in 1993, and was nominated for 12 Academy Awards, which it won Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Score, Best Film Editing, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and for the first time in his career, a Best Director Oscar for Steven Spielberg.
This is Kid's Play. I'll be right back.
Audiences anticipating the third Indiana Jones adventure had to wait 5 years for the return, with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade being released in 1989. After Spielberg saw the 1943 film, A Guy Named Joe, he had been wanting to adapt it for decades after first seeing it on television as a young boy. His adaptation, titled Always, is a fantasy love story featuring icon Audrey Hepburn, and the film was in development since 1980, before finally being released into cinemas on 22nd of December in 1989. Between the releases of Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T., the press took to calling Spielberg a grown Peter Pan, referring to him as a playful spirit who never truly grew up. In 1991's Hook, the clever conceit for the film composed the question, what if Peter Pan did grow up? Jurassic Park followed this in 1993, a sci-fi adventure film that became an instant sensation, and was not only a box office hit, but also assisted in creating a revolution in visual effects that would help to lead cinema into the digital age of computer-generated imagery with its photorealistic dinosaurs. After 2 decades of working for the majority of film studios in the industry, and over a decade after forming his own production company, Steven Spielberg joined together with Jeffrey Katzenberg and David Geffen to create DreamWorks SKG in 1994, the first full-fledged film studio to be founded since the golden age of Hollywood. The studio quickly found success with its broad variety of films, providing both live action and animation. Between 1999 and 2001, DreamWorks films earned 3 consecutive Academy Awards for Best Picture for American Beauty, Gladiator, and A Beautiful Mind. DreamWorks was spun off as a publicly traded animation company, and DreamWorks Pictures has been incorporated as a label under Amblin Partners, for feature films made for mature audiences. Spielberg has continued directing and producing many more films over the years, and before the esteemed director's passing in 1999, Stanley Kubrick had made suggestions to Spielberg about considering to take on AI, artificial intelligence, a project that Kubrick had been developing for some time, and suggested that Spielberg would be much stronger at eliciting a performance from a child actor in the central role of the mecha boy, as well as the volume of special and visual effects that such a film would need. After his passing, he, Kubrick's wife, and brother-in-law, collaborated with Amblin Entertainment and DreamWorks Pictures to bring a unique collaboration between Spielberg and Kubrick on June 29, 2001.
Well, my involvement in AI came about simply because my friend Stanley Kubrick told me a story that he was developing about artificial intelligence. And it was a story that was very close to his heart. For the first time in the 18 years I knew Stanley, he was taking me sort of into his creative confidence on a project. He never brought me into his confidence on Full Metal Jacket or on The Shining, but for some reason on AI, he felt that I was a little simpatico to that subject. Stanley began talking to me about it in the mid-1980s. And in the mid-1990s, he actually called me again. We had talked many, many times during that those 10 years. And then one day he said, I think I have a great idea. I produce it, you direct it. And I kind of took me back. I didn't quite understand what he meant by that. And I said, what, you mean you want me to direct the movie you were going to direct? And he said, yeah, I'll produce it for you to direct.
While Stanley was alive, he said, this is actually a film that should be directed by Steven Spielberg. He appreciated Steven's different talent very, very much, and he saw all his films.
Steven installed a fax machine in his closet at home, and he and Stanley faxed each other directly. Any notes about the script, any comments, nothing went through me, or there were no copies in the office. Steven basically served as his own assistant for this project, and Stanley was the exact same way.
We actually spent 2 months going over all of his storyboards, almost 1,000 storyboards he had already done on the film, and a 90-page treatment that he had supervised based on the short story Super Toys Last All Summer Long by Brian Aldiss, and then the screen story by Ian Watson, which Stanley had pretty much worked on with Ian. It was a great opportunity, and I wouldn't have responded in the positive if I hadn't really thought it was one of the nicest stories I had ever heard. And it was a story that I thought was a perfect story for Stanley. Stanley kept saying, this is the perfect story for you. We went back and forth like that until I finally just said, I think you should do it, Stanley, and I'll produce it for you if you'd like. And Stanley said, no, that's okay. If you don't want to direct it, I'll do it.
When Stanley passed away, his widow contacted Steven and basically said, this film will never see the light of day unless you make it. And it was just like a gift had fallen in Steven's lap.
And I said yes, first because it was a wonderful story, and second because it was a way for me to honor Stanley.
And we basically, from that point forward, any other project went on the back burner, and we were all about making artificial intelligence.
Got it, cut.
And cut, great.
He was attracted to it because it embodied many of the things that he had explored with, obviously, E.T. and Close Encounters. But I think this, in many, many ways, takes Steven several more steps, because Stanley Kubrick is bringing something to this project. And Steven wanted to embrace that and pay homage to that. And so he took Stanley's contribution and then added that to his own. Once he found out that this might be a project he would do, it was a project that he had spent so much time thinking about, that to sit down with a writer and start talking about what he wanted that writer to do, he began to realize it might be better if he just tried to do it himself.
I've done a lot of writing that I haven't taken credit for in the intervening years between Close Encounters, Poltergeist, and now. I haven't stopped writing. I don't sit down and do entire screenplays, but I do a lot of collaborative, the stuff that directors often do in close associations with certain writers. Don't do it all the time, but I've been very involved in writing, or at least in collaborating with writers on most of my directed films. So this wasn't unusual for me to write it, but the story was unusual and so personal to Stanley that I thought it would lose Stanley's personal ideals if I had to recommunicate his ideas through me to yet another party. And I just thought it would, kind of preserve the purity of what Stanley wanted to achieve and the story he wanted to tell if I just bit the bullet and wrote it myself.
Its stunning visual effects were nominated for an Academy Award, along with John Williams' score, whilst the directing, score and supporting role were all nominated for Golden Globes. More films came over the years. Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, another Indiana Jones film, Tintin, Lincoln, The BFG, and Ready Player One were just a few of the films Spielberg created during the 2000s, along with a new adaptation of the West Side Story set for release in 2021. He also executively produced for the record-breaking blockbuster, Jurassic World, in 2015.
Spielberg's success goes beyond his movies. He helped design the E.T. ride, which has become the biggest attraction on the Universal Tour.
You get a little bit of sauna when you go through this also. It's good for the skin.
If you've got some imagination, for those few minutes, you might even think you're on a bike taking E.T. back home.
That's my favorite guy right there. That's the guy, yeah.
C.E.D.
Spielberg married actress Amy Irving in 1985. They had one son, Max, before divorcing. He later married Kate Capshaw in 1991, who already had one daughter from a previous marriage, as well as an adopted son, with Spielberg also adopting him once they married. They then had 3 children together, as well as adopting another daughter, making a total of 7 kids.
I come into contact with a lot of young people, and I found that a lot of these people know all my movies really, even better than I do. And they know all of Marty's films, and they know all of Brian De Palma's films and George Lucas's films, and they're getting to know all of Quentin Tarantino's 3 films. And, you know, but what's happening is they don't know much beyond that. And when I say, what are your favorite films from the old days, from the black and white days of the 30s and 40s, I don't get a lot of answers that give me comfort. And I'm finding that if people are going to just study the movie brats of the 1970s, you know, what they're learning is a pretty weak carbon copy, because all the movie brats learned from the masters of the 40s and 50s and 30s, and I'm sure those in the 50s and 40s learned from the silent movie masters. And so we're all handing influences down and inspiring from generation to generation. And I kind of am a little bit sad that a lot of the young people today kind of have a cutoff point for their own personal influences, and that's like, they don't know a lot of pictures in the pre-60s. My kids will always ask me, is it in black and white? Because I always show them movies, and their big fear is it in black and white. And when I say it is, they don't want to see it. So what's true is the first knee-jerk reaction of my children is they don't want to see a black and white movie. But then I say, you're going to have to. You're just going to have to. And I promise you, 10 minutes into the picture, they don't know whether it's in black and white or color, whether it's in 1:6:6 or 2:3:5 aspect ratio. They're into the movie. And by and large, when they like the movie, when it's over, they're raving about it.
Spielberg has won many awards both in the United States and abroad, not only for his films, but also for his work supporting human rights and social justice. Along with his 3 Oscar wins, Spielberg has received many other honors. He received the Irving G. Thalberg Memorial Award from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in 1986. In 2004, Spielberg received the Directors Guild of America Lifetime Achievement Award and the French Legion of Honor in recognition of his work. The following year, he was inducted into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. In November 2015, the iconic filmmaker was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor.
Everything is like putting sprocket holes in your imagination. It's really a way. It's the only medium where you can recreate the end of the world or the beginning of the world just because you had a strange dream one night and you made a deal with a strange producer who wants to make a film like that, and then you realize the film, and a year later, this strange little figment of your imagination becomes 70 feet, 40 feet, you know.